There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep never fixes, the kind where someone wakes up already tired before the day has even started. Not physically, not in the normal way people talk about being tired. It feels heavier than that. Like the mind spent the entire night carrying something invisible. Like even silence takes effort, and the strange part is, most people around him would never notice it. He still replies to messages, still laughs at the right moments, still says "I'm good" automatically when someone asks how he is doing. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. But there are moments during the day when he suddenly feels emotionally disconnected from everything around him. Someone talks to him, and he hears the words without really processing them. Music plays in the background, but it sounds far away. Even small tasks feel mentally loud, and he cannot explain why ordinary life feels so exhausting when technically nothing bad enough is happening. That confusion becomes part of the exhaustion too, because eventually he starts questioning himself. Maybe he is just lazy. Maybe everybody feels like this and handles it better. Maybe he is too sensitive. So instead of slowing down and asking what his mind is trying to say, he keeps pushing through the tiredness as if it is something to defeat. But emotional exhaustion rarely comes from one dramatic event. Most of the time, it is the accumulation of small psychological weights carried for too long without release. It happens when someone becomes emotionally available for everybody except themselves. When they constantly monitor their tone, reactions, expressions, and behavior to keep other people comfortable. When they overthink conversations long after they end. When they suppress irritation because they do not want conflict. When they hide sadness because they do not want to look weak. When they force themselves to appear emotionally stable even during periods where internally they feel completely overwhelmed. The human brain was never designed to continuously self-monitor. Like that, psychologically, emotional exhaustion often comes from prolonged emotional regulation. The mind is constantly filtering emotions before they are expressed. Instead of naturally feeling anger, disappointment, loneliness, or frustration, the brain immediately shifts into management mode. Don't say that, don't react too much, stay calm, be normal. Over time, this creates a permanent low-level tension inside the nervous system, and the dangerous part is that this tension becomes so familiar that the person stops recognizing it. He thinks exhaustion is just his personality now. That is why emotionally tired people often struggle to relax even when they finally get free time. Because the problem is not simply workload. It is psychological overstimulation. The mind has spent so long surviving emotionally that it forgets how to rest properly. Sometimes he lies in bed doing absolutely nothing, yet still feels mentally busy. His body is still, but his thoughts keep moving. Conversations replay themselves. Future problems appear out of nowhere. Random embarrassing memories return for no reason. Even moments that were supposed to feel peaceful somehow become emotionally noisy, and eventually, another feeling quietly appears beneath the exhaustion: numbness, not dramatic sadness, not crying, just numbness. Things that used to excite him barely create emotion anymore. Achievements feel temporary. Conversations feel repetitive. Even happiness starts feeling emotionally muted, as if the mind no longer has enough energy to fully experience anything deeply. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of emotional exhaustion. People assume emotional burnout always looks emotional. But psychologically, the brain sometimes protects itself by reducing emotional intensity altogether. It is a defense mechanism. If the nervous system remains emotionally overloaded for too long, the mind begins dulling both negative and positive emotions just to survive the pressure. That is why emotionally exhausted people often say things like, "I don't know what's wrong with me," because they are no longer feeling emotions clearly enough to identify the problem itself. And strangely, modern life quietly encourages this condition. There is constant stimulation everywhere. Notifications, comparisons, expectations, information, opinions, pressure to improve, pressure to heal, pressure to succeed before a certain age. Even rest now feels productive instead of peaceful. People are consuming more emotional input in 1 week than previous generations probably consumed in months. The human nervous system absorbs all of it, especially people who are naturally observant. He notices changes in people's tone immediately. He notices emotional distance before anyone says anything directly. He notices when somebody seems slightly disappointed, irritated, uncomfortable, or disconnected. And while that awareness can create empathy, it also creates exhaustion because his brain rarely stops scanning the emotional environment around him. Hyper-awareness often looks harmless from the outside, but psychologically it keeps the nervous system alert almost constantly, and eventually the body begins responding to emotional stress the same way it responds to physical danger. That is why emotional exhaustion can create physical symptoms too. Headaches, brain fog, constant fatigue, difficulty concentrating, heavy chest sensations, feeling drained after social interaction, wanting isolation without necessarily wanting loneliness. The mind and body are never as separate as people think, sometimes emotional. Exhaustion also comes from carrying versions of yourself that no longer feel real. There is the calm version people expect, the responsible version, the funny version, the emotionally stable version. And after maintaining these identities for too long, he starts losing connection with what he actually feels underneath them. So he continues performing normality while internally feeling detached from himself, and this creates another psychological conflict, because emotionally tired people often feel guilty for being exhausted. Their life may look functional from the outside, so they invalidate their own emotions. They tell themselves they have no reason to feel overwhelmed. But emotional exhaustion is not measured only by external struggle. It is measured by internal pressure too. Some minds are carrying invisible wars every single day: constant self-criticism, fear of disappointing others, emotional suppression, overthinking, comparison, loneliness hidden behind functioning routines. The body feels all of it. What makes this even more difficult is that emotionally exhausted people usually become very good at hiding it. Years of functioning while overwhelmed teach them how to appear okay automatically. They smile while mentally detached. They joke while emotionally drained. They keep conversations light because explaining the truth feels too exhausting itself, and after a while, people stop checking on someone who always looks fine. So the exhaustion becomes private. Late at night is usually when it feels strongest. When distractions disappear, when there is finally silence. He sits alone scrolling through random things without even enjoying them, trying to mentally escape himself for a few more minutes before sleeping. And somewhere during that silence, a strange thought appears: when was the last time I genuinely felt emotionally rested? Not entertained, not distracted, not temporarily relieved, actually rested. And most of the time, he cannot remember, because emotional exhaustion builds slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. It is not always caused by one major breakdown. Sometimes it comes from years of emotional survival without proper emotional release. Years of carrying tension silently because nobody ever taught him how to process feelings safely. Years of staying mentally alert because relaxing never fully felt emotionally safe. Psychology calls this chronic emotional stress adaptation. The nervous system becomes so used to emotional strain that calmness itself starts feeling unfamiliar. Some people even feel uncomfortable during peaceful moments because their brain has adapted to constant mental activity. That is why emotionally exhausted people often sabotage rest without realizing it. The moment life becomes quiet, the brain immediately searches for new worries to focus on. It has forgotten how to exist without emotional stimulation, and eventually, exhaustion becomes identity. He stops saying, "I'm tired lately," and starts believing, "This is just who I am." But emotional exhaustion is not personality. It is accumulated psychological weight, and one of the most important things a person can realize is that being emotionally tired does not mean they are weak. In many cases, it means they have been emotionally strong for far too long without recovery. The human mind can carry incredible amounts of pressure temporarily, but eventually every nervous system reaches a point where it begins asking for rest in the only ways it knows how. Through fatigue, through numbness, through disconnection, through loss of motivation. The exhaustion is not random. It is communication, and maybe that is the part most people never hear enough. Sometimes the reason someone feels emotionally tired all the time is not because they are failing at life. Sometimes it is because they have spent years surviving emotions they never truly got the chance to process.